No contact doesn't just hurt after loving them. It destroys the avoidant. You gave your heart. You were patient, understanding, and forgiving. Maybe even too forgiving. You made excuses for their silence, their cold distance, because you loved them, because you believed there was something real underneath it all. But then came the moment you deciding enough is enough. You went no contact, not as a game, not as manipulation, but as survival, as self-respect. And yes, it hurt like hell. But here's the truth no one talks about enough. No contact doesn't just hurt after loving them. It destroys the avoid. Why? Because for the first time, you stop chasing. You stop trying to decode silence. You stop feeding a dynamic that only worked because you kept showing up while they pulled away. Avoidants fear closeness, but they fear absence even more. Because in the silence you leave behind, they hear something louder than any words. I'm not waiting anymore. Suddenly, the comfort of knowing you're always there disappears. The safety net is gone. Their emotional detachment becomes their own prison. And while you're healing, growing, evolving, they're sitting in a space of discomfort they created but never thought they'd have to live in. You didn't destroy them out of spite. You destroyed the illusion they keep being distant and still keep you. That illusion is gone. And with it, their control. So don't mistake your silence as weakness. This is the loudest boundary you'll ever set. And for the avoidant, it's devastating. No contact isn't punishment. It's self-respect. This is one of the most misunderstood truths when it comes to healing from a relationship with an emotionally unavailable or avoidant partner. From the outside, going silent may look like a game. It may seem like you're trying to get a reaction, stir up guilt, or manipulate someone into coming back. But anyone who's actually done it from a place of pain and love knows there's nothing fun about it. No contact isn't about them at all. It's about you finally choosing yourself after being overlooked, invalidated, or emotionally starved for too long. When you've spent months or years giving, compromising, waiting, and hoping, cutting off contact feels like tearing off a part of yourself. But that's the point. You're not doing it because you don't care. You're doing it because caring has started to cost your sanity, your self-worth, your peace. At some point, loving someone who consistently pulls away becomes self-betrayal. It becomes a slow erosion of your own needs in service of preserving a connection that only survives because you kept watering it. So when you choose no contact, it's not a form of revenge. It's clarity. It's the moment you realize that continuing to engage, even passively, is just you participating in your own emotional starvation. You're giving someone access to you who hasn't earned that access. Or worse, who has shown that they don't value it. And the only way to shift that dynamic is to remove yourself entirely, not as a tactic to bring them back, but as a commitment to finally showing up for yourself. Self-respect doesn't always feel good at first. It's not glamorous, it's lonely. It's quiet, it's filled with doubt, especially when the other person doesn't chase you, doesn't about you not, doesn't reach out, doesn't come running. That's where a lot of people break. They interpret the silence as failure, as if the absence of a response means they weren't valuable. But the truth is, choosing no contact isn't a test for you. It's asking, are you willing to sit in the discomfort of being alone to finally protect your energy? No contact allows you to detox from the emotional highs and lows that became your normal. It's a reset. It helps you step out of the push-pull dynamic long enough to ask, was I even happy? So often we confuse intensity with intimacy. We mistake inconsistency for mystery. But once you're out of the noise, you start to hear your own voice again, the one that says, I need more than breadcrumbs. I deserve more than confusion. You didn't walk away to hurt them. You walked away because staying hurt you. And that's the most powerful decision you can make, to finally prioritize your own emotional safety, even if it means sitting in silence that no one rushes to fill. That silence, it's not about you not. It's not emptiness, it's space. Space for you to remember who you are when you're no longer shrinking to keep someone else comfortable. Avoidants rely on your emotional availability, even while they pull away. This is one of the most confusing dynamics in a relationship with someone who has an avoidant attachment style. It's easy to believe that someone who constantly creates distance doesn't need you, doesn't care, or is unaffected by your presence. But that's not the full story. In fact, avoidants often depend heavily on the emotional consistency of their partner. They just don't want to admit it, even to themselves. They may not ask for reassurance outright. They might not say they miss you. They won't often express vulnerability. But their behavior is built on the quiet assumption that you will always be there, emotionally invested, checking in, waiting patiently, overthinking their mixed signals, and giving them the benefit of the doubt. You become their emotional safety net, the stable force they take comfort in knowing is available without having to actually engage in emotional intimacy or commit to a deeper connection. This unspoken agreement becomes the foundation of the relationshiping. They get the comfort of closeness without having to risk exposure. What makes this so damaging is that you, the emotionally available partner, end up doing all the work. This isn't about you're always the one reaching after conflict, the one suggesting solutions, the one showing love, expressing care, creating connection. And it feels natural, even noble, because you're trying to hold the relationship together. You sense their fear of closeness, and instead of being angry, you show empathy. You think if you're patient enough, if you love them gently enough, eventually they'll feel safe and open up. But over time, this dynamic becomes draining, because while you're investing more and they're giving less, and they don't even see it, avoidants often confuse independence with emotional self-protection. They're afraid of being overwhelmed, of losing themselves in closeness, so they keep people at arm's length, but only just far enough to feel in control. And ironically, they don't want you to go away completely. Your presence, your care, your texts, your willingness to wait, those things feed a deep, hidden need for security. You make them feel wanted without forcing them to be vulnerable. It isn't about you not. It's a dynamic they rarely question until you remove yourself from it. That's why when you go no contact, it hits differently, because you're not just taking away your words or your presence. You're removing their emotional backup. You're dismantling the foundation they quietly relied on, even as they pretended not to need it. And that's terrifying for the avoidant, because for the first time, they're left alone with themselves. No more attention to deflect, no more love to keep at bay, just silence, the kind that forces self-reflection. So while you may have felt invisible or unwanted in the relationship, your emotional presence was holding it all together. You were the one making it safe without being made to feel safe yourself. And once you step back, the balance they depended on disappears. That's when the reality sinks in. They didn't just lose a partner. They lost the emotional structure they built everything around. Without ever acknowledging it, silence shifts the power. In a relationship where you've been the one constantly reaching out, initiating conversations, and trying to fix what's broken, it can feel like you're endlessly giving energy into a black hole. Every unanswered message, every lukewarm response, every withdrawal chips away at your sense of worth. And yet, you keep showing up. Why? Because you care, because love makes you hopeful. Because deep down, you believe that if you just try a little harder, show a little more patience, they'll finally meet you halfway. But what happens when you stop? When you stop calling, texting, stop chasing? At first, it feels like defeat, like giving up. There's a voice in your head that whispers, you're losing them. But that voice is wrong. What you're actually doing is reclaiming your power, because the moment you go silent, truly silent, not just waiting for them to notice, is the moment everything changes. It forces a shift in the dynamic. They're no longer reacting to your presence, they're confronted by your absence. And that is a very different kind of pressure. You see, as long as you keep engaging, even just a little, the balance of power stays tilted. The avoidant or emotionally unavailable persons, they don't have to put in much effort. They're used to the pattern. They pull away, you lean in. They go cold, you get warmer. They stay vague, and you try harder to understand. That dynamic keeps them comfortable. It keeps you in a reactive state, always adjusting, always hoping, always proving your worth. But silence breaks that cycle. It introduces uncertainty into their world for once. Now they have to wonder, where did you go? Why aren't you trying anymore? Did I push them too far? This isn't about playing games. This is about shifting from someone who tolerates breadcrumbs to someone who respects their own needs enough to walk away from a one-sided connection. When you stop filling the silence, you force them to confront their own avoidance. You remove the emotional cushion they've relied on, and in doing so, you create space for accountability. Silence says what words can too. I'm you, not you. I'm done explaining why I deserve to be treated well. It says, if you want connection, you have to show up for it. It invites them to either step forward or stay gone, and it does so without begging, pleading, or proving. This is where real empowerment lies, not in punishing someone with silence, but in realizing that your voice doesn't have to keep proving your value to someone who isn't listening. Your silence becomes a boundary. It becomes a message that they can't ignore, even if they pretend to. It recenters your worth from their approval to your own peace. And if they don't come back, that's okay, because silence also gives you clarity. It clears out the noise, the anxiety, the constant emotional negotiations. It shows you, without doubt, this isn't about you not, who is willing to meet you in the middle, and who only stuck around as long as you were doing all the emotional labor. Emotional detachment is comfortable until it's met with true absence. For someone with an avoidant attachment style, emotional distance is a form of self-protection. It's how they manage anxiety, control vulnerability, and prevent themselves from feeling overwhelmed. They create space, shut down communication, avoid difficult conversations, and keep people at a safe emotional distance. And because they've done it for so long, it feels normal. It feels like safety. Connection to them often feels like a threat, not because they don't want love, but because deep down they're afraid of what true intimacy requires. So they find comfort in keeping things casual. They don't say too much. They deflect when it gets too deep. They may show affection in subtle ways, but they rarely express their deeper emotions directly. And if someone gets too close or asks for more, their instinct is to pull back, shut down, or disappear. They don't always mean to hurt people. It's just their default mode of operation. They confuse control with security. And as long as the other person keeps coming back, keeps forgiving, keeps trying harder, it confirms their belief that they can be distant and still be loved. But here's what they don't expecting, that one day the person who loves them will stop. One day, silence will stretch out longer than usual. Messages will go unanswered, not out of passive aggression, but because the other person is finally choosing peace over pain. And that's when emotional detachment starts to feel less like safety and more like isolation. The very thing they thought was protecting them becomes the reason they feel abandoned. That absence is not just physical. It's emotional. It's the absence of attention, validation, comfort, and presence. And for the avoidant, it creates a kind of cognitive dissonance. They didn't want to get too close, but they never really believed the other person would walk away either. They thought the dynamic would always remain the same, and they pull away, and the other person reaches in. But when that cycle breaks, they're left with a kind of emotional silence they aren't equipped to handle. They don't know what to do with that emptiness. They feel it, even if they don't say it. They start questioning their choices, not necessarily out loud, but internally. Did I go too far? Why haven't they reached out? Were they more important to me than I realized? These are questions avoidants usually avoid asking themselves. But the true absence, the finality of no contact, demands reflection. The detachment that once made them feel powerful now makes them feel alone. And here's the ironing: they didn't fear losing the person as much as they feared losing control. But in losing the person, they realize how much control they never really had. Because true connection can't be maintained on one person's terms. And when they're finally faced with that silence, the silence that used to comfort them, it doesn't feel peaceful anymore. It feels like a consequence, a mirror, a wake-up call they never saw coming. Healing isn't just for you. It forces others to face themselves. When you decide to stop showing up for someone who wouldn't meet you halfway, it might feel like you're simply stepping back to protect your heart. And that's true. But what often gets overlooked is how that choice becomes a mirror, a reflection of everything they've avoided, denied, or suppressed. Your healing journey becomes more than just an act of self-love. It becomes a quiet confrontation, one that requires no anger, no shouting, no dramatic exit, just distance, just growth, just the absence of your old self, the one who tolerated too much, gave too freely, and waited too long. When someone has gotten used to you filling in all the emotional blanks, they don't have to confront their own emptiness. They don't have to examine why they keep people at arm's length or why they shut down when things get too real. They've relied on your emotional labor and they maintain that everything's okay, or at least manageable. But when you begin to heal, when you stop responding the way you used to, you disrupt that illusion. And that disruption is powerful. Your healing forces them to ask themselves uncomfortable questions. Why did they take your love for granted about you not? Why didn't they step up when it mattered? Why did they feel safer keeping you at a distance than allowing real closeness? These aren't easy questions, and they're ones they likely avoided for a long time, but your absence creates a silence that demands answers. Not because you're demanding them, but because life does when the comfort of emotional codependency disappears. They may not show it. They might even pretend they don't care. They may distract themselves, date someone new, or act as if nothing happened. But deep down, something shifts, because now, when they reach for the pattern, the old cycle of push and pull, withdraw and return, you're not there. You're not responding with the same hopefulness or fear of losing them. You're not bending to make it easier for them to avoid responsibility. And that change is jarring. Healing means you no longer engage in unhealthy dynamics, and that can feel like rejection to someone who never learned how to face themselves without using others as emotional buffers. When you stop playing your old role, they're left with the truth. They have to do their own work. They have to sit with their discomfort. And while you're focusing on becoming whole, this isn't about you not. They're only just beginning to understand what your presence meant and what your absence reveals. Your healing becomes a light, and while it may blind them at first, it also offers a rare opportunity to grow, to change, to finally do the emotional work they've been avoiding. Whether they choose to take that opportunity is up to them. But make no mistake, your growth doesn't just serve you, it shakes the very foundation they stood on, because once you heal, you stop enabling. And that is the most honest, power force of change there is. Thank you for listening, for feeling, and for being brave enough to choose yourself. Even when it hurts, the path isn't always easy, but the version of you on the other side, they're stronger than you ever imagined. Here's to your peace. Here's to your growth. And here's to never shrinking again just to fit someone else's comfort zone. Take care of your heart. You've got this. Goodbye and thank you.